Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon from the Ordinary Sacred, and it's a little bit of a dark and stormy day here today in Houston. I don't know if you can hear the rain, but I'm excited today to share with you the next in my series on self-therapy, using internal family systems in my own inner system. And today I'm going to talk to you about a perfectionist part, which I got to know on a really deep, intricate level fairly recently, but it has been with me most of my life. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, I have identified as an Enneagram 1, which is also often called the perfectionist. I initially thought this because they say that an Enneagram 1 has a very big inner critic. I have since met at least 4 inner critics. One of them is this perfectionist part. And so, as you'll see, there are so many layers to this part and why this part makes sense. So I hope that this inspires you. This is not meant to be prescriptive for you. If your experience is different than mine, if you experience your parts in different ways, or they communicate with you in different ways, that is okay. You are not doing it wrong. And often when I approach a part, I am coming already with at least a little sliver of self-energy. I know that I'm feeling curious toward the part. And you'll see in this case, it took me some hours to get there. But from the point that I'm talking about the interaction, I am in self. So there may be steps before this that you may need to go through to really make sure that you're in self as you're approaching a part so that you can receive answers from it. But so what happened, this was a few months ago. I was leading a group, as I often do, teaching, and my internet connection was so terribly bad. And the parts of me were just so stressed out during the meeting. But then because I had to keep leaving and coming back and the internet was cutting out, the video, the recording was cut into different pieces. And then when I got off the call, even though I had, promised people that I would send them the recording, I could not figure out how to retrieve the recording. And so I had a researcher price looking things up, and I spent hours and hours doing the same thing over and over and really trying to get this recording downloaded or uploaded, whichever one it is. And I was so frazzled. The only way I can describe it was that I just felt this overwhelming sense of pressure and overwhelm, like I was going to explode or collapse. It was just a really, really big energy, but I kept pushing through it because I have to figure this out. I have to figure this out. Again, evidence of a very desperate part. So finally, after I think the 10th attempt and failing, I went into my closet. I finally decided I'm just going to look at who's here with me right now. So I went into my closet and I got down on my knees, kind of in a fetal position, and I said, "Show yourself to me." And what appeared in front of me was like a demogorgon. If you have seen Stranger Things on Netflix, it's like this alien looking creature. It almost has like a flower head and like opens up like a big mouth. Kind of scary looking creature, right? And it was in front of me, just hissing at me, kind of like this, like kind of screaming, hissing. And it's very, very overwhelming. But I think because realizing too, this is what was in me, right? And now it's in front of me. I was like, oh my goodness, wow. Like you are really, really heightened. Your energy is really big right now, right? And it had these fangs and it was screaming at me, "You cannot make so many mistakes. You cannot do this." It was very, very, very intense. And so I said, I just want to observe you, just want to see what you're about. And this Demogorgon figure just started pacing back and forth and kind of wringing their hands, and I could feel the like desperate energy. And I just said, I see you. I see that you're feeling really desperate. And it turned to me. I was like, stop bothering me. Don't bother me. Don't you see I'm busy? And I said, oh, I see that you're very, very busy. Can you tell me what you're doing? And it said, I have to prevent this. I have to prevent this. And I said, prevent what? And then it was like, can't you see it? And it showed me behind it. It was like this scene of destruction. There was rubble, almost like there had been an explosion. There was fire everywhere. And there was kind of like that police tape around it. And I started moving closer to it to see it better. And the Demogorgon put out its hand and said, get back, stay away. And I said, what is it? And the Demogorgon said, it's hell. And that was when I kind of had this little bit of epiphany, aha moment. Oh, it's literally hell. You are saving me from hell. Like, that's no wonder you're so desperate, right? And so then I had some compassion toward it, some appreciation for its desperation. And I said, how old are you? And in that instant, the Demogorgon just like kind of crumbled down. And there was my 3-year-old self was in front of me, this little innocent toddler. And I said, oh, you're 3. And she said, yeah. And I said, why did you have to take the form of this scary Demogorgon? And she said, I had to be a demon to scare you away from hell. And I said, oh, so, and again, as the self, I'm just kind of like putting things together and asking questions curiously. And I said, oh, so you are connecting in your 3-year-old reasoning, you're connecting that making mistakes equals going to hell. And she said, yeah. She said, and you have to be punished. And I said, why do I need to be punished? And she said, because it keeps you from hell. She said, you have to be punished when you're bad. And I said, well, what equals bad? And she said, imperfection. She says, you have to be perfect. Goodness equals perfection. And I was like, wow. I said, that must be really, really difficult to do. Where did you get that message, right? That goodness equals perfection. And she just quoted a verse to me. She said, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. She was like almost like a recording on repeat. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And I realized, oh, you have heard that message from religion, from your mother, this word of you have to be perfect, whatever that means. Never miss the mark, never make a mistake, never do anything considered bad, or you will be punished with hell. And so then she took me and she just started showing me all of these scenes of my mother throwing out like things that she had baked or cooked, like throwing out the whole entire batch of things because it wasn't perfect, right? And I said, you're showing me how your mother modeled this? And she said she couldn't tolerate it. She couldn't tolerate imperfection. And I got this sense, kind of watching my own mother become very dysregulated and very distressed by making mistakes and experiencing her own self-loathing. And so I got the sense that the 3-year-old was showing me that because she was also standing there in the scene, that she was kind of absorbing that energy, absorbing not just the modeling of it, but that dysregulation, that frantic energy of, oh my gosh, I'm making mistakes. So I got the real sense that it was a legacy burden passed on to her in that way. she said explicitly that she absorbed her mother's self-loathing, that the energy was transferred to her. And I said, so it's a legacy burden. She said, yes. And she said, my mother felt like she would die if she made mistakes. And I understood that my mother had had a really difficult upbringing herself with her own mother who did not allow mistakes. So, and so then I asked her, I said, are there other layers also, like cultural burdens from religion? And she said, yes. She said, it's from all kinds of directions. And I asked if she got it not only from my mom, but also from my dad. And she said no, that it mainly came from my mom. And then she started showing me scene after scene after scene of like being fitted for clothes and like my mom pulling down on the crotch to make sure that there was enough room in the crotch of my pants, or having a shirt that was just a slight V-neck and my mom getting a safety pin to make sure that it was pinned up to here and I didn't show any skin. She showed me a scene of getting my mouth washed out with soap because apparently I had said a bad word, but I wasn't aware that it was bad, right? And so I just knew that I was being punished and that I couldn't predict when I was making a mistake, when I was doing something wrong. And then several scenes of being spanked, being hit. Often when my sister would pick on me and then I would cry and we would both get spanked for it. So again, it was kind of like insult to injury. Like as my young self, it felt like I got picked on and then I got in trouble for it. So if someone else is upset with me, it's always my fault. Is kind of how she had internalized it. And she kind of said, even if I try and try with all my might to predict what will get me in trouble, I cannot predict it. So she was kind of showing me that one of her biggest burdens was this unpredictability, whether it was other people's whims, weather, technology, things that I just couldn't predict were very, very scary. And so she would attempt to control it by trying and trying so hard to be perfect. But of course, she couldn't be. She couldn't predict these things. And so she learned that the only way to respond was this self-loathing, right, that she had taken on from her mother. So I said, how do you feel about taking out this energy of self-loathing that's from your mother and releasing it from your system? And she showed me again kind of these scenes of watching my mother kind of in angst and emotional dysregulation, locking herself in the bathroom, running down the street, wringing her hands, berating herself. And it turned into this kind of like tornado, like all of this energy. And the 3-year-old self was like kind of standing there watching it. And so we decided to create this kind of shield of light, this orb around her that would protect her from that energy. But then she was so sweet. She said, but I also want to help my mom. And I said, what if we could remove like this legacy burden? We could remove this energy of self-loathing from past generations and from you. And how would you like to do that? And she said she wanted to suck it out with a giant vacuum. But then she had an objection. She said, but is this going to make me lose connection to my mom? And as the self, there's kind of this wider perspective. I just said, what if this legacy burden that is actually what disconnects you, right? This shared burden. And if it were not in the way, you could actually have greater connection. And so she agreed to do this unburdening ritual. And so I remember this clearly like it was yesterday. It was so, so touching. I, as my current self, laid on the floor, on the carpet with my back on the floor, and just kind of imagined that my 3-year-old self was on her back next to me and we were holding hands because she didn't want to do the unburdening ritual by herself. So I said, I'll do it with you. So it was like we were both there, and we just did these really deep cleansing breaths of, and we kept blowing and blowing it out, and kind of imagine like there was this vacuum that was sucking it out, sucking it out. And we did that about 20 times or so. I said, we can keep doing this until you feel like all of the self-loathing, all of the expectation of perfection is sucked out. And so again, we did about 20 times until it felt like it was all released. And then the next part is my favorite part. She got up, the 3-year-old, and she stuck out her belly really fat, and she started patting it, and she said, I'm fat, I'm fat. And she started laughing, and then she farted and belched and just started jumping around. And she said something like, I can try anything now. I can fail. I can be human. It's all good. And it was just, I got this sense that she was free to make mistakes, to be human, to be at the whim of the weather and the technology. And it was really like this playfulness, right? That it didn't affect her worth. It was just almost fun, right, to experience. It was just such a shift, such a difference, from this terrified Demogorgon image to this playful little girl sticking out her belly. And so and then she did show me, the things that she couldn't control, things like the weather, other people, even sometimes the state of her own body, and of course electronics, that they could flow as they will. And I can just respond or adjust in the moment and kind of flow with it. And she said, there's no right way. I can experiment, I can learn. And the biggest sense I had was that she had a sense of liberation. And it just a total clearing and freeing in my own system. So fast forward a few months later, because I wanted to give an update. People always ask, well, what's the real change in your system when some of these things happen? I think it was last week, I had a group, very similar thing happened. The internet went crazy, and here I am as the speaker, and no one can hear me because I keep breaking up, and I don't know when I'm breaking up. And but I just felt so calm through it. I felt like, I can't control this. Let's try this. Let's experiment with that. There was a sense of calm and playfulness, very, very different than the last time that had happened a few months before. And this time I think was even worse. The internet connection was really bad. So again, one way when you do this self-therapy work to kind of see the results, the real life transformative results, is to have a similar situation and see how your system responds differently to it. That instead of this default of frantic desperation, I have to control everything, and if I don't, I'm going to hell, essentially. It's, I'm free to go with the flow. This is happening. I don't have control over it. How will I respond? Right? It's very, very different. So I hope you appreciated that example. If you have any questions for me or comments about your own inner work, please feel free to leave them in the comments below.